Guten gardening, everybody. I have something so special for you today. I am so excited. I just got done an interview with Caleb and Jim Gerritsen from Wood Prairie Family Farm. Now, Wood Prairie is where for the last couple of years we've been getting our organic seed potatoes. And if you've grown potatoes, you've probably heard of Wood Prairie Family Farm. Well, I had the pleasure of getting a ton of my questions answered by the experts. And again, I think this is an opportunity that happens very seldom. And now I'm going to open up that video to you so you can see that interview. And I think you're going to hear a ton of invaluable information as you plan this upcoming potato growing season. Now I'm going to release this in a couple of different ways. This is going to be the full conversation, but I'm also a little bit later going to pull segments from this video because there are some pieces there that I really want to drill down into, really want to focus on and make it easily accessible. So it's a long video, so no more conversation at the intro from me. Let's enjoy this conversation with Caleb and Jim. We're going to go ahead and get started today. I have Jim and Caleb Gerritsen from Wood Prairie Family Farm. Thank you both for being here and taking a little time out of your day to answer some questions about Wood Prairie and potatoes in general.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You bet, Paul.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure to get to know you all, even though it's just been through email up to this point. And I think certainly the folks who watch the potato content, which is my favorite content on our channel, are going to be very excited to hear from you and hear some of the questions that we have today, and to get really the professionals' opinions about a lot of things. And so I want to start by talking a little bit about the origin or the philosophy at Wood Prairie Family Farm. So I've written down a couple of questions to ask you, and we'll see how that evolves as the conversation goes on. But the first thing I'd like to ask is, what originally pulled you into growing seed potatoes specifically, instead of just growing potatoes for eating?
Well, I think seed growers start out being table stock growers and then look around, and if they see some advantage of getting into seed, they head that direction. But you want to have experience as a potato farmer first before you get into growing seed, because there's a lot of risk and importance placed on the quality of seed. But the biggest thing is northern Maine is perfect for growing potatoes. As recently as 70 years ago, this area was called the Maine Potato Empire, and it was the leading potato producing region in the entire United States. And in recent decades, the production has shifted out west, where they have a longer growing season. They've got irrigation. They can get higher yields than we can get here in Maine from nature giving us rain. So the production has shifted, but the fact is we've got perfect soil for growing potatoes. We've got warm days and cool nights because we're far enough north that we can grow potatoes through the summer, and it's really perfect conditions for raising potatoes. So as a result, Maine has had a certified seed potato system now for 110 years. And Maine has been supplying seed potatoes to the eastern half of the United States for over a century because we can grow high quality seed up here.
That's super interesting, because when I think about growing up, we would hear of Idaho potatoes, like that was the thing. And I don't know that I had heard Maine potatoes, when probably a lot of what we were actually getting must have come from that area, given that. So you grew a lot of potatoes before you got into growing those seed potatoes. You grew a lot of potatoes yourself. You would consider yourself to have been early on a potato farmer?
Well, we sold at farmers markets. We had 30 different vegetables, potatoes among them. And then we decided that we would narrow down what we were growing and the opportunity for seed. Actually, the reason we got into it, in Maine, I think about 30 years ago, Maine passed the first law that requires certified seed to be planted in Maine. And that's an attempt to protect the seed potato industry so that we don't get inoculum from uncertified seed potatoes that would harm the crop. So at that point, we were buying seed in, and the quality wasn't as high a quality as I wanted to get. And then it dawned on us that if we can't, in the heart of potato country, if we can't get the high enough quality seed that we're after, I think there's a market niche for that. So almost 40 years ago, we got into the mail order business and started raising certified seed potatoes, everything organically grown, and then shipping them. Now we've got customers in all 50 states. So we ship nationally, and we ship 52 weeks a year. Um, the interesting thing about this big country we're in is that on any day of the year, you've got somebody that's either planting a potato crop or harvesting a potato crop. So our job as seed growers is to make that seed available so anyone, anywhere can plant the seed when they need it, when they want it.
Yeah, I really like that aspect of, when I need to get seed potato, you can select when you need it shipped. And it's really interesting to think about the diversity of the various climates around the entirety of the US. And I don't want to stray too far from where we are right now, but I know that you've done over your lifetime anyway, you've done a lot of work with organic, just the concept of things that are organic and protecting all of that. I was doing some background research. I had a student a few years ago in my debate class, actually, who did a presentation on some of the harms of Monsanto, and I know you had some efforting in there as well, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was president of a national group called the Organic Seed Growers and Trade Association. And in March of 2011, we put together a lawsuit and sued Monsanto, challenging the legitimacy of the GMO patents that the U.S. Patent Office had awarded to them. So we realized that Monsanto represented a, a total existential threat to the organic seed industry because they don't contain the transgenic genes from their inventions, and it's a risk to contaminating organic seed. If you have organic seed contaminated with transgenic genes, that seed has lost all of its value. So their trespass onto us negates the value of our seed. And then, remarkably, under US patent law, if we're in possession of their patented seed without having signed a licensing agreement, we are liable for patent infringement. So the irony is being contaminated and then being held guilty by a lawsuit from Monsanto that we've taken their technology, which of course is false. So we went to the courts to get protection.
Oh, that's really fascinating. In looking that piece up and the amount of work, I cannot claim, there's no certification on my end to claim that we are organic certified or anything like that. We do not use any kind of pesticide or anything that's non-organic. So I consider us to be organic growers, even though there's no certification, because I know that takes a lot. But that there's a lot of work that goes into that, a lot of background work that I imagine a lot of people don't know about, especially a challenge like that. So speaking of challenges, I know. Well, actually, I should take a step back because I didn't address this earlier on. So, Caleb, you have taken over the primary day-to-day operations. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I don't even think I made this clear at the beginning, but it's father and son. A father and son. This is a family-run business, and
Absolutely.
so you've taken over in the last couple of years.
2017 is when I took over. So yeah, almost 10 years now.
So Megan, my wife, and I, we started the farm up 50 years ago, and Caleb is farming, and his brother a few years ago came back to the farm. So now Caleb is running the shots with his brother Peter, and Megan and I fill in where we can help.
Okay. All right. Good. I should have made that clear early on to people watching this. But now to go back to what I was going to say, you're known for your organic seed potatoes. You have a lot of other things that you also offer. We got amazing sweet potato slips last season you know, from Wood Prairie, and I would argue that everything that we've gotten from you has been very high quality. But what are some of the biggest challenges um, in the process of growing organic seed potatoes, et cetera, making sure you have that good product?
Well, there's a lot of problems with it. There's everything. So from the soil type, the soil quality, the fertilizing, the crop maintenance, kind of all the standard things.
Well, and then with potatoes, it's the irony is potatoes are a simple crop to grow.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. So if you start with some foundational basics, you really avoid a lot of the problems. So starting with high quality seed, doing the best job you can to improve the quality of your soil. Once you do those two foundational steps, you're going to eliminate 90% of the potential problems that you can have. And then there's, making sure that the plants are well watered. If the rain lets up, so that you supplement with irrigation, and that you keep disease and insects at bay. If you do that, it's a relatively easy crop to grow, can get some very high yields, remarkably high yields, and it's a fun crop to grow because its harvest is like an Easter egg hunt, right? The crop is hidden. You never know what you have until you start to dig it. So it's a fun crop, and kids and have always enjoyed that aspect of growing potatoes. The harvest is the most fun.
It's a very different thing, us growing potatoes and gardeners growing potatoes, because we have to have these seed lots that we sell. They're we're multiplying them up for up to 5-6 years, so we have to keep that seed lot perfectly clean and keep it virus free, because if you lose that through the seed certification because of virus or issues, you've got to start over and you've lost that, and you're going to have it's a 5-6 year process of keeping a seed lot going. So if you lose it in the beginning, it really sets you back, and now that crop is going to be you're going to have a lot less to sell to your customers that fall, and so there's a lot that goes into it that way. But for gardeners, there's nothing easier to grow than potatoes.
Yeah, especially if you start with good seed.
Yeah, absolutely.
That really reduces your risk. And you put the same amount of effort into gardening, whether you're using good seed or poor seed. If you use good seed, you're going to have a much higher likelihood of success and big yield. So to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. You want
Absolutely.
really whatever you're growing in the garden, you want the best seed that you have access to. It's really important. And the best seed is never that much more expensive than poor seed.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite shorts on your YouTube channel that you did was you just sitting there talking about the importance of high quality seed potato. And we've experimented around, like most gardeners have experimented around with growing potatoes that were old sprouted from the store. We've done all of that. And I can say from the little bit of experimentation we've done, we've definitely done better and had better yields in general from having that higher quality seed. There's no question about that. But that actually leads me to my next category of questions around selecting different varieties and breeding. And I think this is an area that my audience is certainly interested in. And so I'll start simple and then maybe move into some more complexity. The first question is, out of the different varieties that you've sold or grown, is there any one that has surprised you the most in some way?
I guess if I had to name one, I'd name Huckleberry Gold, which is a recent variety released in the last 10 years. And it's one of the best varieties that we grow. The plants are big and healthy. The tubers are purple skin, yellow flesh, great taste. They keep all winter. The bugs and disease don't seem to bother them much. And a lot of modern varieties have been bred to be pampered with chemical inputs. So it's kind of unusual to come across modern varieties that really excite us. And Huckleberry Gold, I would say, is that variety. We do have some varieties we're bringing in from Europe that have been specifically bred for organic growing. The Sharpo family, for example, Baltic Rose from Germany. And these are, the European breeders have figured out that organic is advanced in Europe. It's further along than here it is in the United States. And they've figured out that there's a market for high quality organic varieties that have been bred with organic growing in mind, and that they perform superior under organic conditions. So they taste great, they grow well organically. That meets our two criteria for selecting a variety. It's got to taste good and it's got to grow well organically. If it doesn't taste good, we're not interested in growing it. And if it doesn't grow well organically, somebody else can grow it. We're not interested.
No, I can appreciate that. I will. I mean, you mentioned quite a few. Baltic roses I find to be incredible. Love the taste. Love the size of the tubers for the Baltic rose. And of course, I'm obsessed with Sharpos, and it's so funny every time, it's the SARPO. Every time I talk about it in a video, somebody says that's not, it's Sarpo or something like that. So it's the initial research. But I mean, we've tried two different Sharpos, the Mira and the Una, and they've both been fabulous. So I think you're absolutely right about that. And we've definitely grown the Huckleberry Gold from you all and have enjoyed those as well. Yeah, something about the taste. I talk about that a lot in the harvest videos. We look for high yield because we have limited space. So whatever we can get that's going to be high yielding, but most importantly is going to taste good, because don't grow things that you don't eat or don't like. There's no point to that. So actually, I was really surprised this year with King Harry's. They were fabulous, yield wise, etc. I didn't know what to expect. They were awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a rugged variety, really good pest resistance.
Yeah, and I was this. Is that a newer variety as well, or is it just an old variety that's new to me?
It came out. It was bred by Cornell University, Bob Pleistad and Walter DeJong, our friends. And they came out with first variety, a numbered variety that got the moniker Prince Harry. And that had great qualities to it, but the ability to deter insect pests is in relation to the glycoalkaloids content of the potato, the poisonous quality of the potato. And the fact is the glycoalkaloids content of that Prince Harry was on the high side, and Cornell decided after growing it for a few years that they needed to supersede it with a better one that had less bitterness to it. So that's where King Harry came along. And it's really phenomenal. They have hairy leaves. The breeders at Cornell took some wild cousins of potatoes growing wild in Mexico, crossbred them conventionally with round white potatoes common to the Northeast, New York and Maine. And they came up with King Harry has been the best introduction yet. Big volume of potatoes at harvest. The plants are big bushy plants because the insects just don't bother them. Apparently the hairy leaves become a impediment, and it repels Colorado potato beetle, potato leafhopper, and potato flea beetles, which are three of the most serious insect pests here in the northeast or eastern half of the country. So the plants do very well. In terms of eating quality, we have other potatoes that have better eating quality, but we have numerous customers that have related to us that for one reason or another, they could never grow potatoes. They would never grow, insect problems, what have you. Yet King Harry was the first variety they can grow year in, year out, get big crops, and help feed their family. So it's gratifying to know that it's filling that niche, and it's a good tasting variety. I wouldn't call it a great tasting variety, but if you've never been able to grow potatoes before and you love potatoes, it's a whole lot better than nothing.
Right. Then that is great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, the variety, Baltic Rose has such a unique. Everything about that one's unique. The color of the flesh, the taste even of that, I think is unique. We did the caribou russets this year, and I've talked about that in various videos that for whatever reason, russets have been a struggle of mine. I got some massive, massive russets this year, and they were amazing. I think I believe you recommended caribou russet. If I hadn't had like that's the russet that you would go to. Is that what you would say?
Absolutely, and that was bred right up the road here in Presque Isle, Maine. It's a main variety, and it's a breakthrough variety because virtually all russets are either late or very late varieties. And Caribou Russet is a mid-season variety, so it sizes up remarkably early. And that may be why you've had trouble growing, say, Russet Burbank, a 135-day variety. It's hard in a climate like you've got in Wisconsin, like we've got in Maine, to be able to get those potatoes to grow out the full season. But when you can get a variety like Caribou Russet that you can get a full crop in 90 to 100 days, and they size up remarkably fast, high yielding, it's a pretty rugged plant. So if you like the russet type potatoes, this Caribou Russet is a real winner.
Well, and I think that's one of the nice things too about the variety of potatoes you offer is that we all have our different purposes for potatoes, different ways that we like them. I like a good baked potato. I make mashed potatoes. My favorite is roasted potatoes. I love oven roasted potatoes, but I want the ability to have variety, and I think that's important when people are looking at what it is that they're wanting to order, what it is that they're wanting to get a hold of. And that actually leads me to the next question that you addressed a little bit there just by mentioning the early versus late. How important is it when people are picking out the potatoes they want for them to understand that early, mid, late season? Is that actually something that's vital, or does it depend on where they're growing? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, yes, especially where you get hot summers, like those of us on the northern tier states, Washington, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Michigan, New York, Maine. It never gets that hot in the summer compared to the South. So we can grow those potatoes right across the summer, plant in the spring, harvest in the fall. If you're wanting to do spring planted potatoes in the southern half of the United States, where it gets hot in the summer, you absolutely have to pay attention to the length of season of the variety. And it's for this reason. Potatoes are a cool season crop. They do not like hot weather. In fact, once you get into the 90s, if you get steady temperatures above, say, 95, the plants can actually keel over and die. So if you're in a hot area, say in the South, you want to work backwards when you anticipate the first appearance of that steady temperatures in the 90s, especially the mid 90s. And say if you've got from the recommended planting date, say if it's mid March and your hot weather comes on in mid June, then you're going to want to plant mid season varieties or short season varieties that can do their tuber sizing within the 90 days. If you pick a late season variety that's say 110 to 120 days, you're just not going to have enough time for the tubers to size up, and you're not going to get much of a crop. So if you do have that limitation in spring planting, you absolutely want to go with the safe bet, and that would be shorter season varieties to get that growth completed before that hot weather arrives.
And I guess similarly or conversely, then if you have a shorter season because of the cool, you want to, you like you're talking about the 135 days. I mean, that's on a good year, that's my whole season. If I get it in just at the right moment, and then hope hope I have the weather at the end. So in the shorter growing seasons, you're still looking for those early mid season as well.
Yeah, if you're in a mountainous area, say out west to where you've got 90 or 100-day frost-free weather, then you're going to want to go with shorter mid-season. Potatoes are hardier than other crops, like uh, beans. If you get 32 degrees on a night, they're going to kill the beans back. Potatoes are hardy down to about 29 degrees. So that's pretty significant. You can get some nippy days, say up here in early September, that will kill the beans, but the potatoes are going to, make through it. And I think that's the case in a lot of places. So potatoes aren't really restricted by a classic uh, growing season that limits things like tomatoes and beans that are quite susceptible. Uh, on the other hand, one of the fun things that we've been doing the last few years, now that we're shipping our seed potatoes 52 weeks a year, we've wanted to gain some more experience with planting out of what is typically understood as a normal season for growing potatoes. So we had a customer years ago in Michigan that told us that she was planting potatoes in the fall and would put bales of straw on the plants about Thanksgiving time. And then in the spring, she'd pull the bales off and the plants would start growing again and she would get spring potatoes. So we became intrigued with this idea, and we've been now extending our growing. We normally plant up here mid-May to early June, but we've been experimenting by planting into July, into August, into September, even into October, just to see how they do. And typically, these late plantings we're putting in grow bags, container grow bags, so we can put them on pallets and bring them inside on the cold nights. And then after that, 20 or 25-degree night passes and the sun comes out and it warms up, then we put them outside again so they can continue to grow. What we've found for several years now, we can plant even in very short season northern Maine. We can plant potatoes as late as the middle of August and get a harvest of potatoes so we can have new potatoes on Thanksgiving. And I never would have believed that had we not experimented and had our customers not alerted us to that fact. If you can grow potatoes that fall planted potatoes in Michigan, the fact is most parts of the United States can grow a fall crop. It's a popular practice down south where they'll typically plant sometime in August, maybe early September, and harvest a crop, in the fall in October or November. Just working backwards, the same kind of way that a southern gardener would work backwards from the anticipated heat in the summer. In the fall, you count backwards from the anticipated frost date of 29 degrees or colder. So again, if you're going to be pushing the limits of the season, it pays to start out being conservative, go with the short and mid-season varieties. And in our experimentation, that's what we've been doing largely, is experimenting with the short season varieties. But I never would have imagined that a crop planted at the end of summer could have matured in Maine. And none of my neighbors would believe this, but the proof's in the pudding. We've been doing it for several years now. Potatoes that we take out of our refrigerated storage, that we store them through the summer, let them wake up, break dormancy, and then start growing. It's really amazing. And then you have virtually no insect problems in the fall because you're growing them at a time of year when nature, the bugs just aren't around. They didn't know that there'd be a potato crop that time of year. So the plants are especially vigorous and beautiful looking because there's zero insect damage on it. It's really something to learn.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, we do grow some potatoes indoors. We have built an indoor raised bed. I don't know how I'm gonna get that out without disassembling it if I ever have to move it. But I have an indoor raised bed, and so I've played around with that. But the idea that then you get some of the actual natural, the idea that you actually get some of the natural daylight once that cold is passed, and that just makes things easier. I also like that idea that experimentation is a ton of fun. And I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed over the last 5 or 6 years, is just trying to find ways to play around with the plants and do things, grow them in ways that you wouldn't normally grow them. And we'll talk about some of those things, I think, a little bit later. But I like that experimentation. So you've hit on this a little bit with regard to picking variety based on your climate, short, early, mid, late. Is there anything else, or are there any other things that when people are choosing a variety for themselves that either of you think they should really be focused on?
Well, seed quality, making your soil, adding organic matter to the soil, making your soil as good as you can. And the beauty of this, and we recommend that you rotate crops. Every organic gardener, every organic farmer rotates crops, and that they're not going to plant, say, a nightshade like potatoes or tomatoes in the same position year after year. You'd rotate it around. And one simple way, we have a 4-year rotation. So basically, we divide all of our fields into fours, and then we plant in a given field or a group of fields once every 4 years. And then in our case, in the other 3 years, we're growing soil improving cover crops to build up the organic matter, to break up disease and insect cycles, so that when we do come back in the fifth year after 3 years of being in sod, uh, the potato crop has extremely high vigor, performs that well, and good seed that we grow means in the next generation you're going to have high vigor and high yield. So anyway, that's our focus on things. But if you take care of the soil, say in the year you're growing potatoes, the benefit is in those other years of rotation, you're going to get better crops of corn and squash and beet greens and whatever you grow because you have improved the soil. So to me, improving the soil is the best investment you can make. It's going to increase the reliability of the crops, be they potatoes or any other crop. It's going to increase the yield. To me, that's a real investment that you can't lose on. So starting with good seed, whatever crop you grow, especially potatoes, improving the soil, and then making sure that you're adding water if need be. And I think we seem to be in an era where we're going through these weather extremes, extended periods of drought, extended periods of rain. So the beauty of getting too little rain is that if you're set up to irrigate, provide a crop like potatoes an inch or an inch and a half of water per week if Mother Nature is not bringing it, and you can get a full crop. This year in Maine, we had the most severe dryness in 5 years for sure, and it was probably one of the driest years going back 100 years, probably one of the 5 or 10 driest years in 100 years. But we've had drought before, and we've built a couple of irrigation ponds over the last 20 years. So we had the water we needed when the weather turned dry. We irrigated, and we had a beautiful crop this year. And our neighbors, which in Maine, irrigation isn't that common a thing. Some of them told me their yields were off by 30% this year because they just didn't have the water. And on a tight margin crop like potatoes, that 30% yield loss is a real hardship. Yeah.
I'll say it's so interesting that you talk about weather. This season, for whatever reason, we got rain. It seemed like at the right time. It was fairly consistent most of the summer, and that was really nice. That was very helpful because not having to go out and water, because we're not yet set up for a good irrigation setup for our property, but that made things much easier. But I could see, I mean, 30% loss in what you're trying to bring in has to be absolutely awful. I should mention while we're talking today, it's a cold day here in Wisconsin. I don't know if you've been watching the weather. I know that there's a big storm tracking through, but this morning the wind chill was about negative 45 Fahrenheit. And right now it says it's negative 10 outside, but with the wind chill, it's about negative 35. So I'm happy to be inside, but the weather extremes are there. We get those polar vortexes sometimes, and wow.
Well, the interesting thing, you're on the west side of the Appalachian chain. We're on the east side. So that polar vortex usually doesn't hit us in Maine. We get plenty of cold weather. And in fact, the next few nights they're talking 15 or 20 below zero. But it's a generalized cold area in the eastern U.S. But those polar vortexes, they don't seem to affect us. And because we're shipping 52 weeks a year, we pay a great deal of attention to weather patterns because we're shipping a perishable crop in the middle of winter, in one of the coldest corners of the country. So we actually shut down shipping a couple of days ago in anticipation of the ice storm in the south, the cold weather where you are. And, Boston and New York City are supposed to get 1.5 feet of snow. And they get stymied with 4 inches of snow. So I'm glad to be up in the country.
You talk about the quality of a product, and you don't want your product ending up there in a condition that's other than optimal. And so,
Yeah.
you don't want people to have a bad experience. So what is a variety, maybe an underrated variety, or a variety you really like that you wish more people would grow, a variety of potato that you wish more people would grow.
Well, one variety that we've been growing for quite a few years is Elba. It's another variety from Cornell, named after a town in the state of New York. And we grew it as a replacement for Kennebec, which is an old favorite Maine variety. And there was a time when we never thought we would give up on Kennebec, but we grew Elba side by side with Kennebec for 3 years. And this is probably 30 years ago. And Elba is just it's a better variety in the field. Everywhere that Kennebec has a weakness, Kennebec goes and it's just superior. The plants are reliable year in, year out. It has a high tuber set. The plants are rugged. They seem to stand up to potato leafhopper better than most varieties. And then in the kitchen, as a baked potato, say, or a mashed potato, the Elba is every bit as good as a Kennebec. So uh, our job is to try to, over the years, we've grown over 100 varieties of potatoes, and we consider our job to pick the varieties that do best, that taste good, and that grow well under organic conditions. So after comparing the two, we found that the Elba was a superior variety. So we did let go of Kennebec, not because it's not a good variety. It's a very good variety, but it did have some production problems. Tends to grow high in the hills. You tend to get green shoulders on it with the sunlight hitting it. Those potatoes you'd have to toss out. Tends to set a light number of tubers per hill. So you tend to get oversized potatoes and not that many of them. So your yield would be hurt by the set. And Elba is just an example of a variety where the breeders in New York did a great job picking out a variety that does very well under our northeastern conditions, and it tastes great in the kitchen. So if you can have a variety that's more reliable and with year in year out good yields, that's a variety we want to pay attention to. So another thing about Elba, one of the companies that we used to wholesale seed to, they did a varietal test of about 50 varieties, growing them in containers. And of all the varieties they grew, Elba was the number one variety in terms of yield. All 50 varieties, Elba came out number one. So it's a variety that grows well in the field or in the garden, but also it does very well in containers.
That's really important to know. I mean, I think a lot of the people who watch my content probably like me are smaller space gardeners, and so that's one of the things that I talk about. Oh, this variety did well in the container. This variety did well in ground, and so knowing that difference and seeing that's where some of the experimentation comes from, I think as well. But that's really interesting to note about Elba. Actually, we have grown the Elba. I like the Elba. Again, I haven't gone back to varieties that I don't like the taste of, but that one I really enjoyed the taste of, and so that's one we want to keep growing here as well. The Elba. Caleb, did you have the same for you, or do you have any other varieties that you would say?
Well, it all depends on where you're at, what you like to get out of a potato crop. So I can't say what other people ought to grow. If you want to just have a beautiful crop of potatoes or some fun ones, then grow purples and reds and fingerlings and fun stuff. Which, I mean, if I didn't live on a potato farm, that's probably what I would do because it's exciting and the kids like it and all that. But if you're just like you're saying, if you just need high volume, high set, things like that, you're going to pick some different ones that just to fill your cellar and have food for through the winter. So it's all just what are you trying to do? We've got 25 varieties. There's a few in there that everybody's going to like. And so for taste, obviously, Yukon Gold's a great one. I really like the Cuca because I grow potatoes and you cannot mess up a Cuca. They are just rugged. The visual defects are there's none. So grading them is really nice. The virus it's all they're really it's a really foolproof variety. So I like that. And I don't know. I haven't tasted a potato that we grow that I don't like. So I'm obviously biased. But
Yeah. I think farmers are biased towards workhorse
Yeah.
varieties. Show horses don't impress us. Workhorses impress us, and Cuca Gold is one of those varieties. Elba, and interestingly, Cuca Gold was bred by Cornell. It's named after Cuca Lakes, I think, in western New York. But they're good, honest varieties, and there can be real fancy ones that are kind of temperamental, and you know if they have great kitchen qualities, they are worth growing. But as a potato grower, I'd like something that I can count on, that's reliable, is going to give us a crop every year. And if you're a home gardener and you're trying to feed your family, that's going to be one of the important measures of what you grow. Is it reliable? Purple Viking is another variety. It's a beautiful variety with a purple skin and splotches of pink. It's one of the prettiest varieties ever. It's got white flesh, and normally white flesh tends to be iffy on quality, but that Purple Viking is one of the best tasting white fleshed varieties we have ever grown. And in terms of production variety, this Purple Viking, you can feed armies with this variety. It is short season, high yielding, reliable. We had customers ask us for years to grow this, and we were always skeptical because it was a white flesh, and we thought another white flesh, it doesn't take well. Somebody gave us some Purple Viking once to eat, and they were incredible. And immediately after, we got some seeds, started growing, and said, "This is a variety. Our customers are right. We should have listened to them sooner." So we started growing it, multiplying it up, and now we're selling it, and it's quickly becoming one of our best-selling varieties.
Yeah, we did. We That was one of the first varieties of potatoes I grew indoors as well as the Purple Viking, and even indoors, I was getting, I
Yeah.
mean, big potatoes. Those things were, and you're right, they're stunning. It's the rose gold is also like the various. I mean, Huckleberry Gold has that pretty solid purplish, reddish purplish skin, but you get like the rose gold with the pinks in there, and then the Purple Viking with the pink and the purple. It's just there's a lot of fun to be had. There's a lot of variety that if you're just going to the grocery store, you're not going to get, and a ton of variety and taste as well. You're absolutely right. The Purple Viking are phenomenal tasting. Man, interesting thing to me is to how much or how many of the potato varieties seem to come right out of New York. There, the university seems to be doing a lot of a lot of work. That's where our purple Magic Molly potatoes, the ones that we've grown for years here, came out of Cornell as well, or somebody who worked at Cornell. I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift, not a ton, but let's shift a little bit over into some of the diseases, some of the resilience, some of the other challenges that gardeners face. Because I agree with you and some of the things that you said earlier, that it's not that potatoes are a hard crop to grow, but in some cases you get, I mean, they're just things that happen. The cholera potato beetles. The first 2-3 years that I grew potatoes here, I didn't see a one, and now it's like they've discovered my garden, and so now we start to see those things. So let's start with this. How much progress? I mean, you talk about King Harry, for example, but how much progress has been made to really come up with varieties? Is that a focus that are disease or pest resistant when it comes to potatoes?
Well, I'd say Cornell deserves kudos for having been ahead of the curve. They have been doing this breeding program for insect resistance going back 25 years. Um, and I don't know of anyone else that has put as much effort into it as they have. So they deserve credit for that. Disease resistance has always been on the mind of potato breeders. Um, in fact, we were talking about Kennebec before. Kennebec it was released in the 1940s, and it was heralded at the time as a disease-resistant variety, because up until that time, Katahdin was the big variety in Maine. That was released, I think, in 1932, and it's a late round white variety. It's got excellent taste, but it's pretty susceptible to late blight. And when Kennebec came along, it was a real breakthrough, and the farmers immediately shifted a lot of their production over to Kennebec because, in a rainy area like we have in the Northeast and say where you are in Wisconsin, where it can rain in the summer, that creates the conditions to where if you got the inoculum or the spores from late blight, then you can get an infection period and get late blight. And one of the difficulties with that late blight is that the spores have been known to travel 50 miles in the wind. And that means to have isolation, like some areas like down in Peru, where they're growing potatoes in these high mountain valleys where the mountains may be 20,000 feet and the valleys might be 12 to 15,000 feet. They don't have blight up there because they tend to have clear skies. If you've got overcast, then the UV rays from the sun do not burn up the blight spores. But if you're in an area, especially in Peru, I mean, that's the extreme example, but the blight spores that might be coming from the lowlands, they get burned up, so they just are free of that. But in most areas in the United States, especially in the east where we get overcast, you can get transmission coming in from quite a distance away, and so in that way, the best defense against a disease pressure like potato late blight would be varietal selection. And the exciting thing is how the Europeans are doing a great job introducing varieties that have high levels of resistance to things like late blight. And the best examples that we have of that are we've introduced so far 3 members of the Sharpo family from Hungary, the Charveri Research Institute. We started out with Sharpo Mira, a late variety, high solids content, great for baked or mashed potatoes. Then after that, we introduced the Sharpo Una variety, which is the first potato, the earliest of the Sharpo family, and that's a very high yielding variety. Uh, uh, Great taste, and it's got a lower specific gravity, lower solids content. So it could be used for mashed potatoes, but they wouldn't be as fluffy as a lighter variety. But they're great in soups or fried. And then the most recent introduction is one that we just introduced this fall after multiplying it up for a few years, and that's Sharpo Shona, which is the first gold skin, gold fleshed variety. So all of these members of the Sharpo family, the genetic lines go back to the famous Russian breeder Vavilov and the 1930s when when the Soviet regime basically ordered him to breed potatoes that will yield well and reliably and resist disease. So these breeding lines have been going on now for 90 years, almost 100 years, and they're phenomenally disease resistant. And I think that's what we look to. Another example is Baltic Rose, which joins the Sharpo varieties as a variety that's extremely resistant to disease. So I think that's probably the key going forward. Up until this point, organic growers have needed to grow varieties that taste well and hopefully perform pretty well under organic conditions. Ones that don't perform well, let those go by the wayside. Now, however, 40 years into this, we're seeing varieties that have been specifically bred for organic conditions. They have what's called horizontal or wide resistance. They've been bred to resist the wide disease pressures that you might find in an organic garden or an organic field, and they're going to produce good year in, year out. So I think that's what's particularly exciting now, is that we're getting the varieties that we've always needed. They just haven't been available, and now the breeders are making available. We've been importing some from Europe, and are now able to multiply them up and offer them to our customers for the first time ever.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to trying out the Sharpo Shona. And you're right, the Sharpo Una outperformed the Sharpo Mirror for me this year, which I don't know if maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but the Sharpo Mirror has always been a massive producer. And when we talk about plants that look like they're never going to die, I mean, those things just keep growing and growing and growing. And so when we talk about easy plants to grow, in picking up the Sharpo plants, looking into some of the background for it, which you did a great job talking through just now, looking at the drought resistance, looking at all those other elements that make them such strong potatoes for people who maybe don't have all the time in the world to get out there and tend to the garden, constantly. I think that those are absolutely wonderful. We do have to deal with, besides late blight, in some areas, we do have to deal with some of those common pests, the Colorado potato beetle. My go-to has always been, actually, since I saw a YouTube video about it, I take a bucket out and the bottom of a soft bristled broom and just sweep the beetles off. I don't usually put anything out there. I've done some DE, a little diatomaceous earth there, but that only really helps, I think, with the, before they've developed. And so I don't know, what do you recommend if people are dealing with those pests? Is that an issue with rotation? Is that just, well, what do you recommend?
Well, I can give you a firsthand example of how rotation does work. With our 4-year rotation, we would have potatoes growing on the home farm, and then the next year in that rotation, we would cross the road, and it would be 600 or 800 feet away from last year's potatoes to this year's potatoes. And for going on 20 years, it took the Colorado potato beetles a full year to catch up to where the potatoes were being grown. So in that first year across the road, we did not have to go to any effort to keep the Colorados out for five crops, 20 years, 4-year rotation. We had 5 crops of potatoes. Then the population started to increase about 15 years ago to where beetles are more of a problem now than they were, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So everything goes through cycles. Now we're in an up cycle. Potato bugs are a bigger thing. And obviously, in a home garden, it's the rare home garden that's going to have 600 or 800 feet worth of isolation. So we've watched a lot of your videos, and the way that you have your raised bed containers, it would be perfect. You could get some half-inch PVC pipe at the hardware store and make hoops in there, and then get some of the spun bonded polyester row cover and make a cover for it to keep out Colorados from getting into there. That would be a very effective technique, and I'm sure it would be well worth the effort. And it's just so well suited to where you've got the beds and you can stick the pipe in and make a Quonset hut shape. But I know back in the old days up in this country, the kids on a farm would be paid a penny per bug, and they'd go out with a little can, and there's no incentive like a little bit of hard-earned cash. And if you figure that for every female that you're capturing, those females can lay up to 400 eggs, and it's that young larva that's hatched out that's growing just at a tremendous rate of speed. Their increase in body mass is fueled by those potato leaves. So if you can capture one female before she lays the eggs, that's up to 400 larvae you're not going to have to mess around with. So I do think that, and I've tried it myself, just uh, this was the advice I was giving, and I decided I'd follow my own advice. We had a double row of, they were red Dale potatoes, 250 feet long, so 500 foot a row. And this was in the early 1990s, 35 years ago, when we had extremely severe Colorado pressure. And I swore that I was going to protect that one double row by not doing anything except collecting the bugs. And I'd go out there 2 to 3 times a week all through the summer. And I succeeded in doing that. And it took a lot of dedication. And there were times where I was ready to give up on it. But I pulled it off. We had a full crop, didn't have any damage to speak of from Colorado's. So I'm able to say with 100% confidence that if on a small scale, the easiest, the safest, the most convenient way to do it is simply go out there every 2 or 3 weeks and collect those bugs by hand. The problem is if you go away on vacation for a week or two and you're away, or you get busy and then you're going to pay the price. Consistency is its own reward when it comes to picking bugs. So if you're able to do that, that's the best way. The netting is a really good backup, I would say, to picking them by hand.
Who's gonna? Then you got to find somebody to pay you a penny a piece.
Oh, well now.
Well, now we don't have pennies. It's gonna have to be
You
nickels.
might have to pay a nickel,
Right.
a nickel a piece now. It'd be worth it.
That sounds like a story. I can't imagine a farmer sitting there. Bring up your paint can full of beetles. Let's dump them out and count them together.
Hey, you've been collecting pennies all year. Keep your change all year just for that moment. That's fantastic.
On some fields, you can make some money. In fact, we have the potato experiment farm is 25 miles up in Presque Isle, where the variety caribou russet was bred. And they actually come down here because they'll be doing experimentation. They need a supply of Colorado potato beetles. So they'll call up and say, can we come down and get some beetles? And I remember one year, we went through a cycle where it was a down cycle and we had very few bugs. And they called up and I said, gee, I feel bad for you, but we don't have any. There's none down here. They were surprised. They were happy we didn't have it.
That's funny. Well, so along those lines then, first of all, I do have the supplies. I made a covering for one of my long raised beds a couple years ago. So I have all the PVC. I have everything there. I just need to get the floating row cover, and that's not that expensive. That's for the investment and for what it could save you in terms of yield, etc. It's simple, and it seems like that would be easily worth it. But are there any simple or common mistakes? And we've talked enough, I think, maybe about the rotating of crops, so that's definitely one. But are there any other simple mistakes or common mistakes that home gardeners do that unknowingly either invite disease or invite pests in when it comes to that?
Buying potatoes from the grocery store. It can easily bring in virus and inoculum to your garden that'll outlast you. So that's
all right.
Yeah.
So I want to dig in on that. I want to dig on that because we've done it, and I worry about that as a piece of it after hearing some conversation about what you could be unknowingly bringing in. And so, what give me some examples of the risk if you're bringing in that inoculum or those disease. What could happen in the long term?
Well, so just before you get straight into the diseases, seed that you buy at the grocery store, you can buy seed, but most of the time when people say go to the grocery store, get some potatoes and just shove them in the ground, those are table stock potatoes that are likely old generations, so they've surpassed where they could be used. That entire generation that was grown has surpassed what it could be used as seed, so it couldn't be certified as seed. It's likely to be a high virus content.
Yeah.
So as we're seed growers, everything in Maine that you sell is certified or needs to be certified. You've got to have less than 5% virus in that seed, and we pay per seed lot to have that tested every year. So when you buy table stock potatoes from the grocery store, likely they're way more than that. They could be 30, 40, 50, 60% virus, which they're going to taste great. They're going to be fine in the kitchen. But if you were to store them, they'd break down. If you were to put them in your soil, you might get 1 out of every 3 that doesn't rot and put inoculum and virus in your soil. So everything we grow, everything we bring in is all certified seed. It's all been tested by a lab to make sure that it's clean and make sure that it can be grown. The seed that you buy, you got to make sure it's certified so that you know that the seed that you're getting has been tested and it has been monitored so that you're not bringing in that stuff. But you can talk.
Yeah, I can give you one exact issue that's going on right today. And Prince Edward Island in Canada big potato producer. They've had an ongoing problem with a real bad disease condition called potato wart. And for example, in Newfoundland, they've had a quarantine on potatoes from Newfoundland for at least 50 years because they have wart. It's endemic, and they won't let anything go off the island for fear that it will contaminate. So in PEI, it's a big producer of table stock, processed stock, and seed stock. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture issued a quarantine on seed from PEI to prevent it from coming into the United States. However, they, through the negotiated terms of that agreement, they are allowing PEI to ship potatoes in 1-ton tote sacks designed for table stock to come into the United States, to go to packers in the United States, and then they'll be packed up into consumer packs. And say if it's sold at a grocery store chain, Shop and Save, Stop and Shop, Hannaford's, Riley's, whatever, and they have their own bag, the only identifier on that is often product of Canada. So you don't know if it came from Alberta or Ontario or New Brunswick or PEI. And if you possibly had subclinical levels of potato wart that invisible to the human eye and apply that to the soil. Somebody asked an expert once, how long does potato wart last in the soil? And the response he gave was, well, a scientist's career is 50 or 60 years, so we know it lasts at least that long. We're not really sure. 50 or 60 years of introducing a disease into your soil that impacts it for, half a century or a century, we're not quite sure. That's an indication that, things like, our seed inspectors are up to date on all of these possible things that could go wrong, and all the certified seed growers are checked for this. So buying table stock seed, the intended use is for table stock, and there's a reason for that. It wasn't good enough for seed. And then if it wasn't organic seed, it's likely been treated with a diluted herbicide called a sprout inhibitor. Onions are treated, potatoes are treated, so that on the store shelves in the spring of the year, when nature is telling potatoes to sprout, that they won't sprout. If you plant those in the garden, you're not going to have good results. So if you buy organic, as Caleb said, you likely have a relatively high level of virus in it. And we had one friend here in Maine who was a curator for Seed Savers Exchange, and he was growing over 100 varieties of potatoes. And he had another colleague somewhere in your country, Wisconsin, Michigan, something like that. And they decided that they would swap half of their collections to cut down. This was their logic. Not great logic, but as time would tell, but they thought it's less risky for us to have two sites where these varieties are grown in case we have a crop failure in one. Unbeknownst to them, they had endemic virus within their own collections, which, because they were growing these out year after year, the level of virus was something that their crops could sustain. Once they traded half of their varieties and brought in a new source of inoculum, within that same summer, within one generation, they had potatoes, say a russet potato that would normally be like that, it grew the size of a peanut. It had loaded up within one generation so much in virus that they basically lost their collections. Fortunately, USDA, I think it was in Sturgeon Bay at the germplasm facility, they had some extra equipment. And the guy over there, I think he turned a closet in his house into a tissue culture lab. USDA gave him some equipment, and he basically started from scratch from this germplasm and started building up varieties that were disease-free that they could repropagate. But the point of the story is within one generation, you can get quite a buildup of virus. So if you're starting with poor quality seed, intended table stock from the grocery store, it simply isn't going to do nearly as well as potatoes that are designed and certified as seed. And if you're going through the effort of gardening, you want to have a crop, you want to have a good crop. So certified seed is the safest way to get that good crop year in, year out.
And what we sell is, we say low generation or young generation. That doesn't really mean anything to gardeners that much. So we get tissue culture from a lab. We plant that into the ground, into totes, into Vermont compost. We harvest those potatoes that fall and store them, and then the next year we plant them into the field in our, what we call our long tunnel, and we grow those out into mini tubers, and then we plant those into our main field the next year. And then so that's field year 2 when it goes into the
Yep.
the main field, and then we'll propagate that up another year, and so that harvest will be field year 3 potatoes, and then we'll plant it again the next year, and then we'll start selling that, and then the crop from that the year after as field year 4 and 5. We'll sell those to our gardeners, and if we're short, we'll do younger ones. But so those are the generations. And when we say table stock tends to be higher, it could be a seed farm that's growing, and then it's field year 5, 6, 7, whatever, and they'll just sell it off as table stock because they can't get it certified past field year 5.
It varies by state. Maine is leading
Maine.
the pack with FY5 as the maximum.
Yeah. So that's what we mean by generation.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean a lot to gardeners, but for us seed growers, it's
now, one thing I'll add, where Caleb was talking about are growing these early generation tissue cultured stock in tunnels, we have special netting that is such a fine weave. It's called aphid excluded netting, and we import it from France. And the beauty of this is that aphids are the means of transmission of virus, the primary means of transmission. By having these tunnels covered with aphid excluding netting, we're able to get 2 years of growth without exposure to virus, which is our organic way of avoiding these extremely dangerous toxins that the conventional farmers are using to kill aphids. And some of these, like Monitor is the name of one, and you were required to use a sprayer that has an enclosed cab and an air filtration system that scrubs the poison away so that you don't breathe it in. But even these most powerful chemicals, which are of questionable, health safety for the farmer, but it takes 3 seconds to kill an aphid, yet the aphid can transmit virus in 1 second. So you may kill that aphid, but it's after it could have lighted on a plant, stuck its probe in, transferred the virus, and then died 2 seconds later, but he's transferred the virus. In the case of netting, we get complete protection without using the toxins. So we're getting good control without the chemicals. There usually is an organic alternative if you put your mind to it, and that's been our solution.
I tell you what, I'm definitely going to have this as one of the sections that I make its own video, this conversation, because when I think about the discussion around this, one of the things that comes up in comments, etc., around, well, first of all, I don't ever sit there just trying to sell stuff in my videos. That's just never a part of what I do. I offer up my experiences. I offer up the good experiences that I have, and then I make suggestions as to where people can get things. And one of the comments that comes up is just the cost. And you talked about this a little bit earlier, the cost around organic seed potatoes. But as this conversation unfolds, I start thinking, well, okay, the organic seed potatoes may be a little bit more expensive in the short term, but if you look at the long-term potential effects on the garden and future crops, regardless of what they are, even if we're not talking potatoes now, if we're talking about bringing disease into an area and then what that's going to do in the long term to the rest of everything you're growing, that cost seems to diminish. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that makes sense to me.
Well, I can give you one example. You're going to get year in, year out, you'll get better results using certified seed. And I can tell you, this is another anecdote. We had a customer in Washington State, a market farmer, and he got 750 pounds of rose gold from us. And you've grown rose gold before. It's a great variety. It's not the highest yielding variety, but he planted 750 pounds. The harvest that he took off that field was 24,000 pounds, and that's a 32 to 1 increase, a 32x increase. He had good soil, he was doing a good job, but he planted really high quality seed. Had he skimped and saved money, planted the same 150 pounds or 750 pounds and gotten half the yield, that's no bargain, right? If you start with, again, the foundations, start with good soil, do the best job you can building the soil, then add good seed, and then take care of it, you're going to get the best crop. And that's the same principle, whether it's the smallest garden, a farm field, or the biggest field. There is a reason why every uh, potato farmer, conventional potato farmer on a large scale, every one of them plants certified seed. There's a reason for it, and it's because it cuts down the risk. Year in, year out, they know that if they've found a good seed potato producer, and the big guys buy from my neighbors year after year after year, they find a farmer that they can trust, that they get good seed from, and they go back to them year after year after year. It just cuts down their risk, and it's a high risk business. And the margins are so tight, you just can't afford to get those drought years with a 30% reduction, or you try to save a little bit on seed and then find you're off by 15% because the seed didn't have the vigor in it, or it maybe had enough disease that it was holding the plant back and didn't get the yield. So
I think if you bought bad seed and got a 15% reduction in yield, you're doing pretty darn good.
Yeah. You could have quite a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And as the industry matures, the standards increase in terms of appearance, and if you've got rhizoctonia is a fungal disease that can affect potatoes, and it gives a kind of this black scurf. It's like a black netting, and it's not bright. And if you are selling to a wholesaler that discounts that, you could have a severe discount. One of our friends in town was complaining that he spends all sorts of money. At the time, he was complaining he spent all sorts of money on chemicals, and he still was getting rhizoctonia, and they were discounting. And this cost him tens of thousands of dollars a year, and he wasn't shy about applying things to control it. And we've had a challenge with that in past years, but we figured out there are biological inoculants that perform better than chemicals, and we're basically introducing beneficial fungi that colonize the seed piece, that outcompete the pathogenic rhizoctonia fungi, and we get better quality tubers, more vigor, higher yields, because we've done our homework, and grown the crop using these biologicals that enhance health rather than chemicals that hold back. And that's something they're finding, like herbicides that are applied to kill weeds. The fact is, it does hold back the plant. It's a poison. It's designed to kill. It's not like it only kills a weed and it has absolutely no impact on the plants or other life. That's kind of the fantasy that the chemical companies would like to have us believe. But if you're biological farming, which is the foundation of the organic idea, working with nature, you get the benefit of working in harmony with nature without the chemicals and the toxins, and you're actually growing a healthier crop that performs better.
Yeah, getting
To me,
a
that's a
15,
win.
20, 25, 30 times yield by weight is such an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go too far back to the beginning of the video here, but when you're talking about things that like kids love to do, that, I call it digging for gold, but the things that the kids love to do, that experience, when you pull up one and it's just a bunch of tiny little ones. I mean, it is what it is, but you start pulling out those massive potatoes, of course, depending on variety, but it's truly, there's nothing like that. And then you see that return on investment, that massive yield. And just like anything else, it's like you could say, well, I'm probably biased about this, but when you grow your own potatoes, they just taste better. And how long they've been out of the ground, you know where they came from, the whole process, they weren't sprayed with it, assuming how you grow them, but they weren't sprayed with anything that's going to sit there and, what you're talking about, the sprouting inhibitor and everything. You just, that process. And in my mind, that just elevates the product as well. So
Absolutely.
what is your take? I love to experiment. I've talked about that. What is your take on the alternative methods of growing potatoes? And you talked a little bit about containers, but I do a lot of deep mulch, roost style type gardening. Most of my stuff is in raised beds, but I also have some in ground. It's just that our it's very nice soil in terms of nutrient dense clay, but it's also very dense soil. So I do a lot with roost stout as well. What are your thoughts on those alternate methods of growing potatoes?
I think there's a lot of merit to them, but I use this yardstick. The further you get away from nature, the more complicated it gets, and the higher the management skill that's required to get success. And for example, the roost out method, as I understand it, is you lay your seed on top of the soil, then you immediately mulch with a heavy straw mulch. So come fall time, the harvest is very easy. You peel back the remaining straw, and there are the potatoes laying on top of the soil. So it was the roost stout no dig method, and it really is easy. Nobody can argue that point. But from what we've heard from customers, uh, invariably the yield is not as good as if you planted those, a few inches into the soil. Now you are going to have to dig a little bit deeper down to get the tubers out, but I think there's a little bit of a truism in that, is that soil is the best, and everything else growing on top of the soil or getting away from that entirely and growing, say, in a container that's separate from the soil. That's a you're departing a little bit more from nature. So then it's important to keep up the watering. Usually when customers report to us that they got a yield that wasn't what they were expecting, and we walk them through it, invariably they weren't watering enough. And a lot of containers, especially if they're a breathable fabric container, they're losing moisture not only through the plant and through the top of the soil, but through the sides. So they can go through a lot of water. And in order to provide that inch to inch and a half a week, you probably need to water that 3 times a week. And most people just don't realize how important that is. And when you look at a potato, it's 20% solids, 80% water. If you're shy on water during tuber bulking, you're simply not going to size up those tubers because 80% of that's water. So I would say that those are good. And I think the wonderful thing about containers is that some people don't have a backyard, but say if they've got a driveway, they could line their driveway with half whiskey barrels or with smart bags. In our on our website, we sell smart bags that are either 15-gallon or 20-gallon, allowing you to put 3 to 5 plants of potatoes in each one. You could line your driveway and have potatoes or tomatoes or strawberries or whatever you want growing, even though you don't have a backyard. If you've got a balcony, you can put these containers on that. So in the last 20 years, these container gardening has come on very strong. And the wonderful thing is it's given people who have a desire to grow, it's given them the opportunity. If they live in an apartment building, they don't have a backyard that they can plant into. This gives them options they didn't have before. The caveat is the further you get away from nature and the soil, the more you're going to have to pay attention. So I think they're good techniques. If you've got a soil in a garden or a raised bed, you've got the best of both worlds. You've got that soil deep down so the roots can go down, and you've got more of a water reservoir in that mass of soil. But I think these are all good techniques. But everyone has a little bit of idiosyncrasies to it that you've got to learn so you can adjust your management to get the best production out of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, the container gardening is so popular in small spaces, and the watering element of it is so crucial, especially if you go on vacation for a week or two and there's just no, and nature doesn't help you out with watering, and it can just, I mean, I certainly know that from personal experience. It can just really, especially if it's at the wrong time, it can decimate your end results if they're not getting what they need at that time. And with root stout, we've had a lot of fun with root stout. But what I've noticed is, now we're 6 years in, and so since we're, all the material that's broken down, there's a depth there that wasn't there at the beginning. And absolutely, our first couple years in particular of trying to grow root stout were not nearly as productive because there just wasn't that organic material that had already broken down. And now I would say that things are a little bit, well, things are better. I still enjoy growing in there, and the ease of harvest and the ease of putting it wherever if you don't have, a good spot. I completely agree with you too about containers. I mean, they all shapes and sizes. I do think people make the mistake sometimes of picking containers that are too small and making the attempt to grow potatoes or other vegetables that need more, and then realizing that, oh, here's where an error comes in terms of my yield isn't what I wanted, but they're not giving it enough room. So I've seen that as well. And so let's talk a little bit about this harvesting, seed storage, sort of at the end of the other experiences. We talked a lot. I've really enjoyed this conversation, by the way, but we talked a lot about picking and various ways of growing. But when it comes to harvesting, I know I've made the mistake before of, I think I would consider a mistake of leaving some potatoes in longer than I should. Or maybe I you know, treating an early season potato like a late season potato, something like that. And so what seems to happen is it could even start sprouting again before I even get in there to harvest. But what are some mistakes people make at harvest time that maybe ruin otherwise great potatoes?
Well, I'd say the main one, if you have plans for long-term storage of potatoes, you absolutely need to leave the potatoes in the soil long enough for the what's called the skin to set. And what that means, it's a process, takes 2 to 3 weeks, but basically the skin is losing moisture, so it becomes a little bit tougher, and that is necessary for it to keep over a long period of time. It's relatively easy to keep potatoes for 6 to 8 weeks after harvest. They have to go through a dormancy period before they're going to sprout. Um, Basically, it's pretty easy to store them for that 2 month period. If you want to store them for more than that, then you've got to start to pay attention to the details, like um, you want the plant to die down completely before you harvest it. And during that drying down period, it's about 2 weeks, the skin will set, and then you can go in. And if you damage a tuber when you're harvesting it, there's no problem. Just eat that tuber now rather than store it. Put away into storage the tubers that haven't been damaged at all. Uh, and it's only when you're shooting for long-term storage that you've got to get all the details right. And we're storing now potatoes 13 months, harvest in September, and we ship that crop until October of the next year. So we've got to get all of our details right. And it gets really into the weeds. For example, one reason that I didn't mention why Maine has been an important potato state for 150 years is because not only does it not get too hot in the summer, but our falls cool down very quickly. And that allows us to cool down our underground storages quickly. And by dropping the temperature of the tuber down to 38 degrees as quickly as you can after you go through a 2 to 3 week suberization period inside the storage, uh, that will preserve the vigor. The scientific term is you're limiting the physiological aging of that seed piece. So we're able to cool the cellars down, cool the seed tubers down. that maintains the highest level of vigor in the tubers. Then by storing at the proper conditions in the storage, and those are soil-like conditions, cool, dark, and moist. Cool meaning 38 degrees, moisture about 90% relative humidity, and keeping it dark so that light doesn't turn the tubers green, bitter, and that poisonous aspect, the glycoalkaloids, to where you wouldn't want to ingest it. Anyway, in doing that, if you get your details right and cool down the seed quickly, that dormancy period will extend, because the physiological age of a tuber determines when it's going to sprout. If you keep that age down low to where it's young physiological age, it's going to extend that dormancy longer into the spring. And then in our case, we shift from underground potato storage into reefers in the spring. Then we maintain that through the summer. It allows us to preserve very high vigor, producing very high quality potatoes right through the summer, so into the fall, so our customers can plant fall planted potatoes that will quickly break out of dormancy and start growing when they need them.
You have opened up a door into some questions for me, and this is super interesting to me. First of all, why is it important that the seed or the skin setting happen in ground? Why is that? Why leave them in ground versus just pull them out and trying to make that happen out, after they've been harvested?
Part of, I guess the first thing is, you've got to realize that that seed tuber is a living organism. And like every other living organism, it has things that it needs. So moisture is one thing. By having that skin set or develop in the field, it will minimize moisture loss. And moisture loss, a human in the desert is an example of extremity that leads to death, right? So, short of that, a tuber that does not have thick skin, it's going to lose moisture, lose condition. That will equate with losing vigor, which, if it's used as seed, it's going to be a less productive crop. The plant won't grow as well, the tubers won't size as well. It's like the star basketball player on the high school team partying the night before the big game. He's not going to produce as well as if he got a good night's sleep, as if he was eating healthy and doing all the steps right. It just, what we're trying to do is to keep that seed tuber in the condition of the star basketball player in high school. And in the end, the results are best. And there's, 100 different small details that you just need to get right. And Maine is blessed with cold weather in the winter, mild summers, and then quickly cooling down in fall. And that's been one of the advantages as to why we can grow good quality seed and table stock, for that matter.
So if somebody doesn't have a good storage space, like a root cellar, and we don't have a root cellar here, quite unfortunately, but if somebody doesn't have that, then what's the go-to? Obviously you're right. If we're talking long-term storage, I mean 13 months, I could dream of that. But getting all your ducks in a row there. So what are we looking at? Pick varieties that have better shelf life, I suppose. That's one thing. But what else can people do if they don't have that root cellar? I've heard of people. I've never done this, but I've heard of people suggesting that you set a refrigerator to a specific temperature and put some things in there, but I don't know what that does.
Will the humidity be right in the refrigerator? Probably be too dry.
It is too dry. I mean, life is full of compromise. So usually the problem with the refrigerator is it's kept about 34 to 36 degrees. And that's colder than potatoes should be at. What will happen when a potato is stored, when a potato is approaching 32 degrees where it will freeze, it will, sensing it is at risk of dying, it will increase respiration. And if you're storing it as seed, that increased respiration equates with an increased physiological age, so it's losing vigor and it won't perform as well as seed. If it's table stock, that increased vigor is converting some of the complex carbohydrates or starches. It's breaking them down into simple sugars. And when you go to cook that potato, it'll have an off flavor, a little bit sickeningly sweet. And that's an illustration of a tuber that has been stored too close to the freezing temperature, and its physiological response is to increase respiration. The the drive for an organism to survive is nothing is stronger than that. And the potato, the living organism, will sense its conditions, increase respiration, and that comes out as being, if you're going to eat a potato, it'll taste sweet. If you're going to turn that potato into a French fry or a potato chip at the Frito-Lay factory, it's going to fry up dark. Sugar and browning is that condition. And French fries and potato chips, at least before the days of kettle chips, they want white chips. They don't want brown colored chips. So that becomes a problem. Anyway, I'd say that if you had a separate refrigerator that you could keep at 38 degrees, that would be the ideal. As Caleb says, yes, it's going to be dry, but maybe you could put open pans of water in there to counteract that dryness.
Or a humidifier or something.
Yeah.
I'd seen one video on, I don't know if this is real, it was just a video, but they were just digging a hole and putting the potatoes underground in a you'd think that they would just rot, but maybe in a burlap bag, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think I may have seen that same video.
Yeah. I think I may have seen that same video.
All bets are off there, but
we've all seen the video.
And hopefully they weren't in Wisconsin or Maine.
You're not getting down in there. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've also heard people, and we experiment around with this. It didn't go very well for us, and somebody told me that it was because we didn't use a large enough container. But I had a 5-gallon bucket of sand that I kept damp, and then I put some seed potatoes in there. But I mean, they sprouted just like they would have if I hadn't put them in there. So I don't know. But I've heard other people talk about how they've had massive barrels with sand in it, and that's how they did it. They just go down there and dig out a potato, and that's how they grew up. But I just haven't had any real success with anything like that. And I think that's a question probably people, if they're growing enough potatoes, probably have is, what's, if I don't have that space, what's my best my best bet? And in my mind, it is find something with longer shelf life, try to keep it out of the light, and keep it in a cool temperature, as cool as you can, in your indoor space, wherever that cool place is, and then just eat them as you go. That's been my experience. I don't know if there's anything else that I should suggest.
Well, you did hint at it, and variety selection is important. The variety Baltic Rose is extremely dormant. So there are among potatoes, you've got short dormancy varieties, medium dormancy, and long dormancy. And dormancy is an inverse relation to sprouting. So the more dormant, the less likely it's going to sprout, or the more days it's going to take to get to the physiological age that it's going to sprout. So a short season variety might be like Russian banana fingerling. It stores well through the winter, but if you want to break it out of dormancy, it's very easy. After the 1st of December, simply warm it up to 70 degrees. It'll readily break dormancy because it's a short dormancy variety. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got Baltic Rose, which it is hard to wake Baltic Rose up in the spring. When we go, we warm up all of our seed before we plant it. And Baltic Rose is the first variety we go to, the first variety we grade, the first variety we put into the heat room, because we know it's going to take twice as long to wake up in the spring as every other variety that we grow. So for long keeping, a variety with long dormancy, and you've got others. Yukon Gold has very good dormancy. Butte Russet has very good dormancy. Baltic Rose is the best, and you advantage yourself by picking varieties that have this dormancy. And on our website, on our individual variety pages, we have a potato characteristics chart, and it has 12 or 15 different characteristics about that variety. And one of the places that we have is dormancy, just for this very purpose. If you want a long keeping variety, you look in that, and we indicate which varieties have long dormancy. That means those are going to be the best keepers. And a variety at like Baltic Rose, once you get into 42 to 45 degrees, as soon as you get through dormancy, or the 6 to 8 week dormancy period after harvest, nature is telling this potato to start to wake up. So if you have a short dormancy variety at 42 to 45 degrees or warmer, it's simply a matter of time. It's going to start sprouting. But even then, the battle is not lost. You can break the sprouts off. Uh, uh, the biggest problem with sprouts is that they suck moisture out of the tuber. So by breaking the sprouts off, you can continue to eat it. But the easy thing to do is to get a variety like Baltic Rose that is very long dormancy. It's going to be very resistant to sprouting. Eventually, when it does sprout, then break off the sprouts. But that'll be a lot later in the spring and early summer than most any other variety.
If the potato starts to soften up a little bit at that point, as it starts to, and you break off, is that still edible, or is that?
Absolutely edible. It's just moisture loss. 80% water. If it's lost the first 10% that it loses, you can't really feel any softening of the skin, but from 10 to 20%, then you can see softening, some wrinkling going on. But it's absolutely uh, edible. In fact, we had an old couple of neighbors. Dawson had a born in 1899 and 1900, and they were basically small scale diversified farmers. They'd grow 5-6 acres of potatoes. They would eat Irish cobbler potato. That was their variety. They would eat that 12 months a year. And in the summertime, they'd have a couple of potato barrels full of Irish cobbler, and they'd put that into their wood shed on the north side of their house, and they would eat that until the new cobblers came in August. So I would say they would eat potatoes and Jacob's cattle dry beans 20 meals a week. It was just the staple around which their diet evolved. They grew everything in their garden. This is modern day homesteaders. These would be the models that you'd go by. And anyway, they would have potatoes that they would eat 12 months a year. And of course, they'd be a little bit shriveled. But the key that I learned from Doss was that for long-term storage for eating, you want to change the air. You want to take them out of a moist cellar, and for storage over the summer, you want the air to be cool, but importantly, you want it to be dry. So their woodshed on the north side of their house allowed them coolness, meaning 60 to 70 degrees maximum, but it was the dry air that prevented the sprouts from elongating. And they'd cluster at the base of the eye. You could cut them off with a knife, eat the tubers, and it would be perfect. So the old timers had a lot of things to teach us.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think that's something I have seen people do, is throw out potatoes when they get a little squishy, or not squishy, spongy. Spongy is a better way.
Yeah.
A little spongy at the eyes, but that's not really an issue other than it's just moisture loss. That's something I did not know
You
as
wouldn't
well.
want to use that for seed.
No.
But the table stock would be just fine. No problem.
That's such a good point, and that's gonna. I have another question about this still, but I want to go back to something. The seed potato that we've gotten from you has all been nice, firm. Like you can tell it's not wrinkly, it's not spongy, none of that. But I have seen in a lot of these stores, especially later in the season, if some seed potato has been passed by, it's just been sitting out there, which is what usually happens. Just bags sitting everywhere. It's just spongy. It's old. You can tell it's old, and that it's not been well maintained or not well taken care of, certainly at the store, because who cares about that? I mean, that's just sitting there. It's an item to sell. And so I think that's important to note. So I've had this question come up in different opinions, and that is whether or not we should wash the potatoes after we've harvested them before storage. And I heard somebody tell me that it helps to remove some of the potential for disease if you do that. But I want your opinion on to wash or not to wash once you've harvested.
Absolutely don't wash.
Correct. We used to sell table stock potatoes to Bread and Circus, and then they got bought out by Whole Foods. And we'd always get in fights with the buyer. And he said, well, every other potato we buy has been washed. And we said, we don't wash potatoes, we clean them. We use nylon dry brushers to buff, to clean the potatoes, get the dirt off, and to buff it. But you should not wash a potato until 10 minutes before you're going to cook it. As soon as you wash a potato, it kicks enzymes into action that are starting to age that potato. So if it's bad enough if you're washing table stock going to go into a grocery store and it sits on the shelf for 2 or 3 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, whatever. But if you wash at harvest, there's no way those tubers are going to do well by washing. Potatoes, even if if you've got a wet fall, you don't want to go out there and harvest with the soil wet. You want to let that soil dry out so that the potato, it breathes through the skin, and you don't want mud caked on it any more than you'd want it caked on your face. And that's what one farmer years ago said, that you treat a potato skin the same way you would your face. You don't leave it in a bucket of water, the way you get prune fingers and having it submerged in water for too long. Potatoes are a living creature that is breathing through the skin, and you don't want to smear the mud on it. You want to wait for a good day when the conditions are dry and then take them out, but you don't want to wash it. That would be the wrong step for anything that you're going to store potato wise.
It can also spread virus, washing the potatoes.
Or bacteria, especially soft rot bacteria that might make entry into a potato when, say, a rock hits it at harvest and you get a little ding in it. And then if you've got some of these videos you watch on the commercial potato operations that are putting up table stock, they'll have a wash tank that all the potatoes are dumped into. And this is simply how high production potatoes are done. But they're swirling around in this murky water, and it just, as a seed grower, it'd be the last thing you'd want to do, because you're gonna spread a problem from one tuber. All of a sudden, every tuber in that box now has that problem spread to it. But it's the industry. People expect potatoes to be washed. I guess it could be a commentary on modern civilization, that you can't wash your own potatoes in your sink. But the point is, the ideal way is to not wash a potato until right before you're going to cook it. And absolutely that's the case if you're going to store it for any length of time. And then harvest on a nice day, enjoy yourself. If it's a rainy period, wait a while, wait for the ground to be right. And you can do damage if you go out into your garden or field and try to work it too wet. You can smear that soil, create compaction that you're going to pay for it for years. So, the organic way of doing things is not push anything to extremes, be moderate. There's always equipment to repair on rainy days. Don't push it. Enjoy yourself, and God designed it to be out in a potato field on the sunny days, not the rainy days.
I like an overcast day sometimes with no rain, where it's been nice and dry, so that the sun's not hitting me too hard. And then especially certain times of the year, but something about October in Wisconsin, when we're starting to really get in there and harvest, is usually in the 60s, and just getting out there enjoying it, it's really nice.
That's perfect.
I agree. That I will tell you that what you just said about washing potatoes is I have not been washing my potatoes, so that makes me feel good that I've been doing what I'm going to consider to be the right thing, because I hear what you're saying. It makes perfect sense to me, and I'm glad to hear that. What I typically have done is, after I've harvested it, just taken my hands and just moved any pieces off, any like caking or anything, and then just there it goes. And that's just simple. Bring it inside. The stuff washes off just fine when it's time to eat. And it's not like you're carrying in massive amounts of soil anyway. I have 2 questions left for you, and I really, again, appreciate your time, spending this time with you today.
Our
The
pleasure.
first one is, what's that? I hope you've enjoyed the conversation too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're kind of odd. We like talking about potatoes.
Hey, so somebody said to me the other day, one of the comments they left on my video was, "Man, you spend a lot of time on potatoes." But I agree. It's just enjoyable to do. There's something about it. Maybe it's the number of varieties. Maybe it's the experience. It's the harvest. It's all of that. But it's enjoyable to talk about. Let's say I have some wood prairie seed potato. I grow my crop, and then I want to save some of that seed potato. What are my risks in, or how long should I continue to grow the subsequent generations without being worried about the risk of virus or other things? Or is there an amount of time that's a good idea?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of latitude, which is a function of insect activity. So if you're in the north, say the northern third of the United States, you can probably get by saving one generation. So say you buy certified seed in the spring, and then you grow a crop over the summer, harvest in the fall. You could take that harvest, a portion of that harvest, and plant it the next spring, and the amount of virus that you probably picked up that year is not going to significantly reduce that next crop. But to play it safe, I would buy new seed, new certified seed the next year. So you're basically, it's every other crop. If you're down south, it gets riskier because you've got higher temperatures, you've got more insect activity, and that insect activity is going to include aphids. Aphids transmit virus. So you're going to load up, and in most cases, virus is not visible. Same season transfer of virus. We go out, we rogue our fields once a week for about 6 weeks in the middle of summer, and we're trying to remove rogues or plants that there's something wrong that may have virus in them or whatever, but we take that out of the field. And if it's a virus plant we take out of the field, that means the aphid that gets blown in here from the Gulf of Mexico, um, it may have virus in its system, or it may have fed on a sick plant somewhere, and then it comes into your field, sticks a probe in, and transfers the virus. If you don't have a sick plant or a virus plant in your field, it can come in, and if it doesn't have that virus in its system, it's not going to transfer it. So we are roguing to improve the quality of the crop that we're growing. And in doing that, we're getting a higher quality crop, and it, um, in the end, allows us to get, better readings from the inspectors when they come out looking for virus. Also gives us a handle on, managing the crop, seeing, like, we like to go out and rogue first of the week and then get a handle on what pressure we might have for Colorado potato beetle, potato leafhopper, something like that, and whether we need to do some kind of a foliar program to respond to that. But being out in the field is good. Roguing, in our case, as seed growers, this isn't anything that a home gardener needs to do. If you're buying good quality seed, you've done your part, and that seed is going to grow well for you. If you save back your seed, it's unlikely that you're going to see it, so you're going to have to go by the numbers. If you're in the South, say the southern 2/3 of the country, you probably ought to buy certified seed every crop that you plant. It becomes more risky. One way to do it maybe would be to plant a spring crop to certified seed, and a fall crop, a portion of that harvest, say from May or June, and then go back for the spring crop to buy certified seed there. But so the rule of thumb is, I'd say, never be more than a year away from certified seed. And in the north, you're probably safer than in the south because of the insect populations.
And also, if you don't have good enough storage to be able to keep the potatoes at the right temperature. We ship whenever you want. So when you place your order, you put on there exactly when you want it. We'll store them in our perfect storage facility. They'll be perfect, and they'll come right at the exact time that you need them. So that makes it a lot simpler for you as well.
We had another anecdote here. We had two brothers up in Wisconsin or Minnesota, and they each had farms beside one another. And one brother would always like to get his 50 pounds of potatoes from us in the fall for seed, and then he'd keep it. And the other brother would have us ship in the spring, so we'd keep it over the winter and ship in the spring. And the fellow that had us ship in the fall, he called us up complaining that he never had as good a crop as his brother. And we tried to think it through, and I said, well, the one variable here is that we're storing the seed that your brother uses and he gets a better crop, and you're storing the seed. So it sounds to me like you need an improvement in your storage. Tried to be diplomatic.
Yeah.
So that was the difference. The point is the exact same variety, same seed lot, harvested at the same time. The only variable was how it was being stored. So there was something, either he was storing it probably too warm, but he could have been storing it too cold, to where it increased the respiration, increased the physiological age, and reduced the vigor, and that reduced the yield. So if you're a seed grower, you got to do things right 13 months a year. And that's what we do. That's why you want to go to somebody that's been growing for a while, that has picked up how to grow to do a good job, and somebody that's kind of just focused on details. And our Dutch background, that's what we do. We're focused on details, and you end up getting better results.
Well, you talk about being focused on details. That's one of the things I really enjoy about your website, just in general, is the amount of information there. And you've talked about some of those pieces, but whether we're talking about dormancy period, just information about each of the products, so we know what to expect in terms of yield, in terms of time frame, in terms of storage, and all of that's there. There's a ton of detail there, so you can really be really well informed before you make a potato buying or seed potato buying decision. I think that's important. Well, as we wrap up today, I wanted to ask if there, from both of you, really, if there's a piece of wisdom that you'd like to pass down, or a piece of advice, or something along those lines that you'd like to pass down to potato growers that maybe we didn't talk about today, but just something that you'd like to send out there to the folks that are going to be watching this video, in terms of just a piece of advice. What do you got?
Feed your soil, just like you feed your body. Whatever you eat is, if you eat garbage, you're going to feel like garbage. You're gonna have health problems, things like that. If you're planting your potatoes in garbage soil, they're not going to produce good plants, high yields. You can taste the difference between a vegetable or fruit grown in good soil with good nutrition, and one that was grown in terrible soil, or low nutrient. I won't say what I was going to say. Low nutrient quality soil, or soil less is what I'll say. You can taste the difference. You can put them on the table in front of you, and you can see the difference on a something grown in really good, really rich soil, and something that's mass produced on soil with no organic matter. You can see it. You can taste it. We've all tasted lettuce and fruits, and they're just like, you kind of get the hint that this is an orange, and it looks kind of like an orange. But man, you can have one beside it that will just blow you away. And it's just all about what you feed the soil and how you take care of that. So that's, to me, that's the most important thing. It's pretty darn simple. You can get your soil tested if you absolutely want to get perfectly analytical with it, and figure out what exactly that soil was deficient on. Or you can just pound the fertilizer to it, make sure it's got good high organic matter, and you just know it's going to work well.
Since Caleb stole from me the idea of the soil,
So I said it first.
Yeah, I'll pick one other one, and that's to develop a strategy about when and how to plant potatoes. And I think what we're learning is pretty exciting stuff. people in the South have known this for generations. You can plant a second crop of potatoes in the for harvest in the fall. Plant it August, September, harvest in the fall. What I think is, our experimentation is teaching us, and our customers have led the way teaching us, is that in most parts of the lower 48 states, you can plant a fall crop. You can then have two periods of new potatoes, and that you need to have a strategy for it. So, say if you're in Wisconsin, say in your case, you plant a spring crop, say April, you harvest that crop in August, and then you're going to have a dormancy issue. So it may be that you need to get seed from us or a company like us for crop that you plant maybe end of July. Then you grow that crop and harvest that when your cold weather comes mid October or something. So basically, you can have new potatoes in the spring, in the late spring, early summer, and in the fall. And you can double the amount of production you're getting from your garden. And I think, before it was just, for the most part, the historical fall planted region is just the states right along the Gulf, Texas, Southern California, and like that. But I do believe that the reality is that you can plant fall potatoes in much of the country. So it's a matter of, picking varieties, pick the short and mid-season varieties to start to make sure you have enough time to get it in. Talk to your neighbors about when might be a good time, and if they don't know, just have some fun experimenting. And that's what we've been doing. Several summers we've been planting new crops every 10 days just to see, and we keep track of that. And what we've determined, even in very far northern Maine, 6 miles from Canada, that we can grow successfully a crop planted in mid-August to get a fall crop. So if we can do that in northern Maine, there's virtually no parts of the country that can't do that, maybe even later into the fall. And that's kind of exciting to be able to double your production. And the best thing about growing potatoes is getting new potatoes that, and unless you grow them yourself, or maybe you've got a farmer at the farmer's market that you can get them from, it's something the grocery stores never have. They're selling storage potatoes, and that's what's so special. A little bit of, you boil them, a little bit of butter and salt and pepper, and it's a meal in and of itself.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was talking about too. The fall harvest in October, later October, is one of my favorite times to harvest potatoes with the overcast sky. And it's only been the last 3 or so years that we've been doing the fall potato planting. And you're right. New potatoes, fresh potatoes, anytime you get something that's out of season at a time, it's like having, growing indoors and harvesting leafy greens or something like that. I mean, it's not the same, but what I'm saying, it's like, it's not when most people are doing that thing. And so there's something even more special.
Well, and I think you make a point there. I think with the change in weather that we're now getting, I know here in Maine, the typical spring is colder and wetter and later, and the typical fall is drier and warmer and later. So it's kind of shifting. And, 3, 4 generations ago, they never anticipated this. It used to be 50 years ago, if we escaped a fall frost at the end of August, you could be guaranteed the first 4 days of September we would get it. And now we're going 2 out of 5 years, we're not getting frost until the middle of October. So things are changing, and that means we need to kind of open our eyes to new opportunities that's there. And growing a second crop of potatoes, almost regardless of where you're located, is a pretty exciting prospect.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure I've got a ton of content here. I'm going to do this as a long form video for those who are going to be watching this and make it to this point, because I just think this whole conversation has been fantastic. And then we'll also have the opportunity to take some of the segments from this as well, so that people can focus in on some of their questions, because I think there have been some things that we've talked about today that, I mean, I didn't know for sure, and some, I don't want to say they're myths that have been busted, but when I think about when you should throw out your potatoes, or whether you should, or like those little things that that people just think that there's a common knowledge around. And I think that was talked about today. So Jim and Caleb, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here
bet.
and for this conversation.
Well, if you stuck with us through the entire video, you made it the whole way to the end and you're here listening to me right now, first of all, thank you so much. And then secondly, I think there are probably pieces of this video that you're going to want to rewatch because, again, there's just so much there. What a phenomenal conversation. I really appreciate the amount of time that Caleb and Jim were willing to spend having this conversation. I love the fact that gardeners are so willing to share their expertise, and boy, it doesn't get any clearer. That expertise doesn't get any clearer than when you're talking to folks like those over at Wood Prairie Family Farm. As always, there is a link to a coupon in the description of this video from Wood Prairie Family Farm. So I'm going to post that link in the description, and I'm also going to put that as the pinned comment for this video as well. So if you're looking to get some incredibly high quality organic seed potatoes, this is the place to go. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed today's content and found it useful, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.